Prabhupada, Gauradesh.
Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Shoranandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashoranandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Shoranandana Vrajajana Ranjana Shoranandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Hari Hari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Srimad, Divine Grace, Srila Abhay Charanavinda, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Alle Ehre sei den versammelten Gottgewalten. Alle Ehre sei den versammelten Gottgewalten. Alle Ehre sei den versammelten Gottgewalten. Alle Ehre sei Shishi, Guru und Gauranga. Alle Ehre sei Srila Prabhupada. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Mutali Srimati Bhakti Bhushan Swami Prabhupada Sumo Sammanaya Savatrangola Kripalaya Satyari Shila Satya Krishna Mam Shivurami Namaste. Ich habe mal eine Frage zum mittleren Teil. Denkst du, der Mridanga, Beat und die Katas hat zusammengepasst? Ich hatte das Gefühl, weil die Katas hatten den schnellen Rhythmus und du hattest noch keinen Rhythmus. Zum Schluss ja, mit deinem schnellen Beat, da war beide schnell. Aber ich hatte das Gefühl, du hattest noch einen langsamen Rhythmus und er hatte den schnellen. Oder? Was denkt ihr? Der mittlere Teil? Der anfängliche Teil war gut, da wart ihr beide so auf langsam. Der mittlere Teil war ein bisschen... ja, ich hatte das Gefühl, es passt nicht zusammen und zum Schluss war es wieder gut. Das ist nur eine Frage. Ich bin kein großer Musiker, ich habe halt nur so mein Feeling dafür. So, guten Morgen, Hare Krishna. Wir sprechen in, the language is English, okay. So, reading from Transcendental Diary. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prajarine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. So we are in Sri Vrindavan Dham in 1976, and Srila Prabhupada is in a discussion with Dr. Kneuper. I think last week as I came we were also already in that discussion, must be a longer discussion. And they are speaking, I'm just reading here the page before, about Christianity and Bhagavad Gita and so on, and Hindu. So let's see how it continues. Dr. Kneuper said that he felt that the confrontations we are now facing will perhaps give our devotees a chance to teach and clarify our position. Well, that we are doing, Prabhupada said. But this is the opposition. That our boys are trained up. They are trying to meet the opposition. But my point is that such a nice thing we are giving. Why they should oppose? That means uncivilized. Why good things should be opposed? They say, in God we trust. And we are speaking of God only. We have no other business. And they are opposing. And they write, in God we trust. Hypocrisy. If you believe in God, we trust God, all right. They are talking of God, let us hear. That is sense. Once again, he appealed to Dr. Kneuper as a philosopher and theist to take up the practical work of real education. So now, if educated men of your country, they come forward, understand this philosophy, then combined effort. My philosophy is that American and Indian, American money and Indian culture combined together, the whole world will be changed. That is my philosophy. It is coming to some extent. Prabhupada asked Jagadish to read out the newspaper article he just received from Giriraj in Bombay. It lays out a brief history of Prabhupada's beginning, his mission, and his idea of the blind man and lame man assisting each other, America being blind and India being lame. The article focuses on Prabhupada's presentation of a genuine Vedic culture through his books and describes our current Indian projects, especially Mayapur. ISKCON is also building a model Vedic community in Mayapur. We are still building. Near Calcutta, based on cottage industry and agriculture. The important principle is that everyone must be gainfully employed. In ISKCON Mayapur's project, hundreds of persons operate spinning wheels and more than a dozen handlooms dye the cloth, process rice and dal by hand, crush sugarcane for sugar products, and manufacture by hand wooden shoes and other items of daily use. On 25 acres of agricultural land in Mayapur, ISKCON is developing and demonstrating scientific farming procedures such as crop rotation, organic fertilization, and using improved strains. ISKCON is also cross-breeding cattle from Canada and Australia with Indian cows to increase milk production. I didn't know that. Thus, the community provides its daily needs, acts as an agricultural development and demonstration center, and additionally feeds thousands of people twice every week. Within the next 10 years, according to ISKCON's plan, the Mayapur projects will extend into a complete Vedic city with 50,000 inhabitants, its own university, where is that? Airport, where is that? And stadium. It will also claim the world's largest planetarium with 410 feet, with 410 feet high temple. "410 feet high? Is that our temple? Or is it bigger or smaller?" Nobody knows, no? Nor do we know what 110 feet means, as we are used to meters. Prabhupada, listening with pride and satisfaction, interjected to inform his guests that we have applied for 350 acres of land from the government. So that means more land. Yeah. In the article it said 25 acres. I also don't know how much that is, but it doesn't matter. But Prabhupada said, no, we have applied now for 350 acres. 15 times more land. If we get it, he said, we will spend many crores of rupees on the project. I would like to read on because it's so interesting, but I think I have to stop. Do you have any questions? Or comments? So what were the points here? One thing is the Mayapur project. ISKCON headquarters in India. Another thing was in the beginning, because the discussion is very much about the opposition that ISKCON met at that point in the world, especially from America, that ISKCON was opposed by others, and Prabhupada says, but you are saying in God we trust on the dollar note, and now we are speaking about God, who you supposedly trust in, and you oppose us. And he used the word hypocrisy. What do you think?
Because the
Yes?
people, they don't have knowledge. They want to trust really, but without knowledge, simply I trust. It would be nice, but it doesn't work this way.
Yeah?
So who's saying it's hypocrisy?
Prabhupada.
Prabhupada, huh? Yeah, it makes sense.
On the dollar note, in God we trust.
Well, it's just...
The secular government, no? Yes?
It's just, a nice word for them, right?
Yeah.
Really beautiful sentence.
Yeah. In God we trust. Okay, and if someone wants to explain who God is and increase trust, make it real, then no, we oppose. I mean, in one sense, even religious people, there are many atheists now in the world, but even religious people, usually they are fighting in between themselves. No? I don't accept your God. Your religion, your faith is, maybe I say is good and fine, but real religion is my religion. We have the truth. No, our way is the right way, your way is the wrong way. And then there has been so much fight over the years between one religion and another. And people are a little bit fed up with that religious fight, and they have lost faith in religion. That is also understandable up to a certain point. But in the end, the existence of God cannot be denied by any sane person. Maybe intellectually you may think because of your education at school, where it's everything. Religion is also a subject, I don't know, in your countries, if at school they teach religion. In Germany they do, at least at my times they did. So religion in our culture, Western culture, Germany and also America, it still has its place. It still has its place, is accepted. Even religious freedom, wonderful thing. No? In some countries you don't have religious freedom. At least religious freedom is there, but the importance of religion is so much downplayed that really it doesn't matter very much. If you want to believe in God, if it makes you feel well, if it gives you some comfort of life, the miseries of life, is your private issue, is okay, you can do it. But really it's not for intelligent people, intellectual people. They only trust science, they trust evolution theory and whatever else is there. But if it calms you, if it makes you feel well in your heart, okay, you can subscribe to a religion, whatever you want. So in that sense, an official statement from the government, in God we trust, is really hypocrisy. Because it's not the message they want to give. The message is rather, okay, if you want to believe in God, God doesn't exist, but if it helps you psychologically or you want to do it, it's fine with us. But in God we trust, really? If you really trust in God, it has a consequence, no? You do something about it. If you believe there is a supreme God, you organize your life in a very special way. You study religion, your own religion, maybe other religions also, religious books. And if there is a society that is teaching about God, well, you should be interested. Maybe you don't agree with all the points, but you should be interested. And especially study such books as Bhagavad Gita, because God is very scientifically explained there, not only scientifically, but it's an open religious book. It doesn't say you have to be a Hindu. You need to have this faith, that faith. In the Bhagavad Gita, all kinds of religious paths are explained. And all kinds of spiritual uplifting practices and attitudes are explained. So if you trust in God, if you at all believe there is God, you have to study such a book. Anyway, this is why Prabhupada said it's hypocrisy. What do you think?
Same thing in Germany when the politicians have to do some oath or of loyalty, they say, so wahr mir Gott helfe.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
They never ask God for help. You never see them talk about God any occasion.
Yeah. It's just a show. Or because it's the old tradition, we have to do it, the oath. Actually, that is part of the problem. If you really take out God out of the picture completely, then human society will become mad, uncontrollable. Because why do we still have values, moral values? If you really believe no one is seeing it, no one is judging me, I can do whatever I want, well, a real atheist, or as Krishna says in the Gita, Asura, a demon, he thinks like that. But he has no moral. His heart is cruel, completely cruel. If you have the majority of the population really coming to that state, society will go mad. So it's easier to control people. The government leaders who are atheists, at least those who control, they think if the population is a little pious, is good. It's easier to control them. So our politicians can also swear an oath on God, or we allow religion, we support it, and so on. But we ourselves, we don't believe in it. That is the hypocrisy. In that, I personally think, I'm convinced that most people in the world are religious in their heart. Even they might not practice or so, but in their heart they are religious, except a few. The problem is the few who are not, they are in control of the world right now. Any questions or comments?
People might just want to be good, not definitely they don't have God in their mind, but they want to be good. If you accuse somebody to be bad, he's always defending. So there must not be God. It's just to be good.
Yeah.
Because it's also propagated in all movies and whatever.
Exactly.
God is winning.
Yeah.
But there's not necessarily a picture of God here.
Yeah. So then my question would be, why do you want to be good? What is it? Why do you want to be good? Warum willst du ein guter Mensch sein? Where is this feeling coming from that you want to be good?
It's fear. If you're not good, I'm gonna feel bad. It's fear.
Okay. Because your parents are behind, or the teachers and so on.
You want to be loved. You want to be loved for others.
Yeah. But apart from that, social pressure, or you want to be accepted, apart from that, isn't there in the heart of the human being a natural feeling to act in the right way, to not be cruel? That is also there. Where is that coming from? Where is this thing? Yeah, obviously it comes from God. Because God, as an origin of everything, is the Supreme Father, as we say in all religions practically. He wants all his children to be happy and be nice to each other, to be good to each other. That manifests in your heart also, because you are a small part of God. And God is living with you in your heart also. So there it starts to get interesting, to really get some knowledge about God. So if you trust in God, get to know God better and your relationship with God. Then you can get out of your hypocrisy. So, and for this purpose, we are studying Srimad Bhagavatam now, in English. Because Srimad Bhagavatam is the most important book to understand God, according to our philosophy. So we are in Canto 5, chapter 6.
Can I get the German one?
Yeah, take it. And it's text 16. Is that correct? Long text again. Difficult to read. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 How do you do it usually when there is a long text? You don't repeat all the text, right? I'm reading it alone and then word for word. Okay. Reading it alone will be difficult enough. Iti hasma sakala veda lokadeva brahmana gavam parama gurur bhagavata rishabhakshas kshyasya vishuddha charitam iritam pumsam samasta duscharita biharanam parama mahamangalayanam idam anushadayopachittayanushnoti ashravayati vavahito bhagavati tasmin vasudeva akantato bhakti anayo api samanuvartate. Das hat sogar einen Punkt am Ende. Das sehe ich normalerweise, das sieht man, dass es Prosa ist, weil bei Versen gibt es das normalerweise nicht. So, iti, thus, hasma, indeed, sakala, all, veda, of knowledge, loka, of people in general, deva, of the demigods, brahmana, of the brahmanas, gavam, of the cows, parama, the supreme, guru, master, bhagavata, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Rishabha Akshyasya, whose name was Lord Rishabdev, Vishuddha, pure, Acharitam, activities, Iritam, now explained, Pumsam, of every living entity, Samasta, all, Duscharita, sinful activities, Abhiharanam, destroying, Parama, foremost, Maha, great, Mangala, of auspiciousness, Ayanam, the shelter, Idam, this, Anushradaya, with faith, Upachitaya, increasing, Anushnoti, hears from the authority, Ashravayati, speaks to others, Va, or, Avahita, being attentive, Bhagavati, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Tasmin, unto him, Vasudeve, to Lord Vasudev, Lord Krishna, eka antata, unflinching, bhakti, devotion, anayo, of both groups, the listeners and the speakers, api, certainly, samano vartate, factually begins. Translation. Shukadev Goswami continued. Lord Rishabdev is a master of all Vedic knowledge, human beings, demigods, cows and brahmanas. I have already explained his pure transcendental activities, which will vanquish the sinful activities of all living entities. This narration of Lord Rishabdev's pastimes is a reservoir of all auspicious things. Whoever attentively hears or speaks of them, following in the footsteps of the acharyas, will certainly attain unalloyed devotional service at the lotus feet of Lord Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. The teachings of Lord Rishabdev are for all the people of all yugas, Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, and especially Kali Yuga. These instructions are so powerful that even in this age of Kali, one can attain perfection simply by explaining the instructions, following in the footsteps of the acharyas, or listening to the instructions with great attention. If one does so, one can attain the platform of pure devotional service to Lord Vasudeva. The pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees are recorded in Srimad Bhagavatam, so that those who recite these pastimes and listen to them will become purified. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. As a matter of principle, devotees should read, speak and hear Srimad Bhagavatam persistently, 24 hours daily if possible. That is a recommendation of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Kirtaniya Sadahari. One should either chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra or read Srimad Bhagavatam and therefore try to understand the characteristics and instructions of the Supreme Lord, who appeared as Lord Rishabdev, Lord Kapila and Lord Krishna. In this way one can become fully aware of the transcendental nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, one who knows the transcendental nature of the Lord's birth and activities attains liberation from material bondage and returns to Godhead. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksho Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarupyascha Kripa Sindhupya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So here in the end of the explanation of the activities of Lord Rishabdev, we are almost at the end of the chapter about the activities of Lord Rishabdev. And there were other chapters which were also talking about Lord Rishabdev. So this narration is coming to an end. And as practically always in Srimad Bhagavatam, at the end of each pastimes, at the end of each story, there are benedictions for those who hear these stories and who explain them. So this hearing and repeating, explaining are the two most important activities of someone who trusts in God and wants to connect with God, wants to understand God fully, become a fully conscious, God-conscious person. And these two processes are called in Sanskrit Shravanam, Kirtanam. As in Srimad Bhagavatam, Prahlad Maharaj explains, there are 9 basic principles or activities of a devotee of the Lord, or of someone who wants to become a devotee of the Lord. And these 9 activities, these 9 principles, begin with Shravanam and Kirtanam. And actually, each of these 9 principles in itself is so strong that it alone can deliver the living entity from this world, from repeated birth and death, from identifying with material nature, and can help or make that person, that soul, completely understand his spiritual nature and thus become qualified to go back to his real abode, to his, I don't know if abode is the right word, Heimat, his home, where he belongs to, the spiritual world. And especially the first 2 processes are important, which are Shravanam and Kirtanam. Hearing and repeating, hearing and chanting. So hearing and chanting what? About what subject matter? About God's activities and the activities of pure devotees who are on the same spiritual, pure spiritual level as God. And the Srimad Bhagavatam is that book which is full of these descriptions. And each story in itself gives this benediction. If you hear this story, like now we are finishing the pastimes of Lord Rishabdev, you will become completely pure at heart and reach perfection by hearing this story. And after hearing, you can also explain it without adding any speculated thing, concoction. You can explain in your own word. Actually, we have to hear sufficiently, also process the information in our minds, in our intellect, that we are able to explain it in any circumstance, in our own words. So repeating does not necessarily mean like word for word, as a parrot. No, you hear whatever you hear, the output is exactly the same in the same word. That is okay, but even better is because when you are speaking about this pastime of Lord Rishabdev or anything else in Krishna consciousness, you have to consider who you are talking to. No, isn't it? Okay, if we have an assembly of devotees in a temple or in any place, we will speak in a certain way, because we can expect certain things, a certain base, that everyone has a certain base. And I can speak on that base, because you already know, and you have already accepted that, maybe even realized. So I can speak on a certain base. If I speak with other people outside that assembly, I have to adopt my kind of explanation, my kind of rendition, to make it understandable and relevant for that person's life. So in order that I can do that, I have to hear properly, first of all, the proper source, And the proper source is Srimad Bhagavatam, or anyone who can explain Srimad Bhagavatam, repeat Srimad Bhagavatam, with a pure heart. And okay, first I have to hear, and I also have to process what I have heard. I have to put it into my life. I need to have the experience that this is true. Actually, in a certain sense, you can already experience that the Srimad Bhagavatam is true while hearing it. Because you can have immediate realization by hearing. Isn't that true? Isn't that your experience also? You hear Bhagavatam and you know, this is true. This is absolutely true. It's so pure, it's so authentic. I know in my heart it is true. If I compare this knowledge to any kind of other knowledge that I have heard before, what I have heard, what I've learned in society, in my parents who were bringing me up, uncles and aunts, whoever in the first years, and then all the indoctrination, sorry for this word, at school, when you go into the kindergarten where it's more playing, but as soon as you go to school, there's a whole process of education, which is, well, it's kind of intentionally guided to make you, not only to teach you mathematics and geography, but also give you values in life, to form your personality. It is done by societies, especially done by school, is a certain intended process. So anyway, whatever knowledge you have gotten in your education, school, university, whatever you have learned, what you have seen, are heard in the radio and television, or nowadays it's kind of outdated, is now social media and whatever. So whatever you have heard from anyone, if you compare this to Srimad Bhagavatam, isn't it that the Bhagavatam is so much superior to all kind of knowledge? First of all, you can learn things that you have never heard before. No one explained that ever to you. And also it's of a such high degree of purity. It's so touching. I remember in my life when I came in contact with Srimad Bhagavatam, last week I explained a little bit how I became convinced of Krishna consciousness, of Bhakti, of the philosophy. I didn't understand it I was a guest in the restaurant. At that time there was a restaurant here. And I think this place should always have a restaurant, but that's only my idea about it. Maybe sentimentally, because I became attracted because there was a restaurant. It gave me the opportunity to enter here in a, how to say, incognito way. What is the right word for that? Well, I'm going...
Anonymous?
Yeah, anonymous. Actually, I want to say something else. Something that is not entangling you or binding. What is it? In an informal way or whatever. I don't find the word now. So you go to a restaurant, you eat there, and you go out. Otherwise, if you go to the temple already, is another thing, because you know there's a religious group, and maybe you don't want to do that. So it was an easy access for me that the restaurant was here. I was interested in vegetarian food. The food was very good. I liked the atmosphere and the music, but I didn't, and the devotees were also talking to me, because that's what they do usually. And I liked them, but I wasn't convinced that this is a genuine spiritual path. And I was looking for a genuine spiritual path for myself. So I understood it by reading Bhagavad Gita. And after reading the Bhagavad Gita, actually I read it mostly in the restaurant because for some months there was a servant there who needed 1 hour to put the food in front of me and of everyone else. So I used the time for reading. Fortunately, that was 1995. There were no mobile phones. If I had had a mobile phone at that time, I would have probably been there. But there were no mobile phones. So, and there was nothing else. There was some transcendental music to hear. And sometimes there were no other guests even, but still I had to wait 1 hour. So what I did, there was a bookshelf just behind where I was usually sitting by the entrance, and there were many books, so I was interested in spirituality, and there was a Bhagavad Gita, so I took the Bhagavad Gita, and I read almost the whole Bhagavad Gita while coming several times for many weeks. I read almost the whole Bhagavad Gita before eating. And then after some time, not only before eating, but also while eating, because it was so interesting. And the devotees told me, well, usually you don't do that, to touch these books and eat, but for you it's okay. And I said, okay, thank you. And I continued eating and reading. So that was very interesting for me. Bhagavad Gita convinced me to a certain point. After I had read 3/4 of the book, I was so convinced that I wanted to have the book also at home, so I could continue reading at home, and I wanted this book for myself. 3/4. So, but still, I thought I will buy the book. So after reading that book, I was already friends with some devotees who were there. I knew some of them. So I asked someone, one of the devotees, I have finished the Bhagavad Gita now. What should I read next? So she told me, Srimad Bhagavatam. Da steckt der Nektar drin. I remember these words. There you find the nectar. And I was thinking, because of my background of language, what does it mean, nectar in a book? You know, this is an example. We devotees, we have a certain language, which is not always very understandable for people. If you tell a devotee, the nectar is there, they will immediately, wow, this is spiritual nectar, transcendental nectar is very enjoyable. But for an ordinary person, for someone who is not conversant with such language, it didn't make so much sense for me. But I had trust in that person, and nectar sounded as something positive, delicious. Okay, I will taste the nectar of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So I had bought the Bhagavad Gita. I don't know, it was maybe 20 euros or I don't remember. So then I was inquiring how much is the Srimad Bhagavatam. And she said, actually it's not one book, it's 12 books. And it costs like 200 euros or something. Well, so this is a little bit too much. And so I didn't buy it immediately. But there was a bookshelf in the entrance, and there were many books. And among them there were some cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam also. Not all, Also the first canto was not there, so I couldn't start in the beginning, but there were some. I think there were 4 or 3 or 4 were there, and I was looking at them and I was waiting for food. And I started reading the second part of the third canto. Not even the third canto from the beginning, because the first part wasn't there. The second part was there. So I read there. Of course, this was all the plan of Krishna, as always. Krishna had his way. Why did I have to start with the second part of the third canto? Because at that time I was already I'd started to take up a yoga practice. I was a yoga practitioner. And yoga at that time, and still now, but at that time it was the best thing that I had. A tool to practice. I found this is such a great tool to transcend my consciousness. To change my consciousness is when you do yoga, meditation, breath work properly and intensely, it does something with your consciousness. It's a great tool. So I was practicing yoga every morning for 2 hours. And in those 2 hours I did like 6 or 7 or 8 asanas in 2 hours. So I did them intensively, because I found out when you do them intensively, you keep them long, and they were after beginning, when you have to get into it, they were classical postures. They were intense. Then the mind has to surrender to the posture, and it transformed my mind for the whole day. Anyway, the point what I want to make is I had great appreciation for yoga. And if you know what is in the second part of the third canto, it's all about a great yogi, or most of the part, Kadama Muni. He was practicing yoga, mystic yoga, with postures, meditation, and so on. And that story was very relevant to me. But he was also a bhakta, and he got a son that was another incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, Prabhupada mentions him here in the purport, Lord Kapila. So it comes on the level of bhakti, how yoga is also related to bhakti and so on. It was very relevant to me. So I became even much more convinced about bhakti. Actually, I was passing through the stage of, while I was reading these books, I was passing through the stage of thinking that bhakti is the best path that exists, better than yoga even. I was convinced. At a certain point, just by mainly reading, also being in the restaurant and hearing music and kirtan, and I bought also some cassettes after some time, but mainly reading, I became convinced this is the best path. But I cannot do it. That was a certain stage I had, because the presentation of bhakti in these books, it's not something sentimental. You can see it's a very deep process, and it also asks you to follow some principles which I thought I'm not capable of doing it. I cannot subscribe to this because it's too much. It's beyond my capacities. Because it's something very serious. I was looking for something serious, but I didn't feel qualified to do bhakti. But while reading on, especially after reading the second part of the third canto, I finished that book, I had to read another. I still wasn't prepared to buy the whole 12 cantos. So I read, I don't remember exactly what the next book was, but one of the books was 7th canto, Nishingadev's appearance. And another was also the 2nd canto. Yeah, anyway, I don't know in which order I read it. But continuing to read, at one point I understood also that this process is very merciful. It requires, is built on principles. You have to come at one point or another to follow these principles. Not because these are rules and principles and so on, because if you take to these principles, your sadhana becomes very strong, your character becomes very strong, your mind becomes very strong. So, but at the same time, the process is so merciful, even you are not qualified. Prabhupada explains this in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, and also throughout his books, again and again, the main points. Even if you are not qualified in the beginning, but by just not rejecting the idea, by appreciation, you eventually become qualified. Maybe not in the beginning, but you will become qualified. Just take through this process, even just reading Srimad Bhagavatam, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, you become spiritually advanced, and at one point you will be qualified. You will be able to do things you can never dream of in your conditioned state. And I became convinced at a certain point that I will be able to do it. I don't have no idea how, but I have such a faith. These words give me such a strong faith and conviction that everything will be possible. So this is the faith and conviction, the realization a soul gets when coming in contact with Srimad Bhagavatam. Hearing the stories from the Srimad Bhagavatam. They are just purifying. They are purifying you from all misconceptions, from all other ideologies, from all other conceptions you might have, from bad habits, from all impurities in the heart. Everything is washed out, and you become again what you really are already, a pure soul. And the pure soul is full of consciousness, full of knowledge, and blissful. And that's our realization also. While studying Srimad Bhagavatam, our realization is how we become pure, how conscious we become, how knowledgeable we become. We can really understand things, we get real knowledge, and also how blissful we become. Each of these three things is so convincing in it alone. Just becoming blissful, just experience this kind of blissfulness, this kind of happiness, this kind of nectar of the experience of your nature as a soul of being blissful by taking up any of these processes of bhakti. It's so blissful. It's a kind of happiness that cannot be found anywhere else. It just cannot be found. And if you come in contact with that, maybe it takes a while to get deeper into it, to really recognize it. When you come in contact with that, you know this is your true nature and this is what you need. And you don't need anything else. And that's it. So, Srimad Bhagavatam is why I'm here now at this moment, and probably also why most of you are here. What has convinced you in your heart and gave you the nectar you were looking for in your life. Any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yeah? Yeah.
Yesterday, I was in the train with Prabhu, and we met someone who recognized us as so-called Hare Krishna devotees, and then he was asking us like, what do we do, what our beliefs are, and then I just told him like a little bit, and then he was saying actually we should recognize that all of us are God, and you know, and he was saying it's important to put people like Krishna or Jesus on the platform or like on the stage and pay them attention and worship them. But then he was saying we should also put ourselves on that very same stage. And, I found it ridiculous, but I just wanted, I didn't really know what to say. Like I just told him there's Bhakti Vedanta and there's Advaita Vedanta, and it's two different schools. Both of them are good, but you can decide what you want. I didn't want to like, you know, say like we are superior and you should surrender.
I think you did very well.
So my question is how to deal with that kind of situation.
Yeah, usually our reaction to that is, oh, Mayavadi, this is, I have to defeat him. No, I have to oppose this very strongly because it's false. So, of course it's false. Many things are false, but what do you want to do in that moment? Can you help a person, convince a person by just arguments, by just defeating them, arguing in a strong way? So maybe, but probably not, because when you attack someone, that person becomes inimical to you, and it's difficult to win the heart of a person when you are in a kind of fight. So that is necessary in a situation where there is an assembly of many people and someone says this, okay, you have to also, if possible, in a mannered way, but with arguments, philosophical arguments, defute that philosophy or point out the mistakes in that philosophy. But on a personal level, it might be very different. What I find, and I believe, will be very convincing for these people is that actually our philosophy is Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva. So different and everything is different and everyone is different and non-different from the Supreme Source. God and the living entities and nature is different and non-different at the same time. So in that sense, he is not wrong. We are the same also. We are the same and different at the same time. Isn't that wonderful? It's not exclusive. It's not saying you're only different. It's also not saying you're only one. Because with a little bit intelligent, we can see actually we are not exactly one. Because why are you there and I'm here? And when you go out of the train, you will go somewhere else, have a different experience. So it's kind of intuitive and also intellectually understandable that we are different. And also that we are different from God. Or is your understanding about supreme consciousness? If your consciousness, the state you are now in, is a state of God, that cannot be. But anyway, we are also the same. No? It's partially true. And that is also the strategy that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used in his preaching to Mayavadis when he wanted to convince them. When he was only with Mayavadis, there was no one around that could be confused by their philosophy, he presented himself very humbly. Why don't you study Vedanta? You should study Vedanta from Shankaracharya. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, oh, my spiritual master told me I'm a fool and I should not touch Vedanta. He told me just to chant, please excuse me that I'm dancing in the street. And then at the same time, he was very attractive to people, and by his behavior, they became more interested in what he had to say, and they asked him questions, and he answered them in such a way that they became more interested and more interested. And at one point, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he kind of made it clear to them that they were not happy with their philosophy. And they found out, yeah, actually we are not happy. We are not blissful. Anyway, it's a whole strategy there which we cannot explain now. Yeah. I don't know, this is what comes to my mind. Be nice to them. Don't subscribe to their ideas. Don't confirm wrong concepts, but the part that they are getting right is okay. And you can add to that another part. So they can get a little extended understanding. Hare Krishna. 8:55. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Actually, you have to work, or you're not going to work?
Yeah, but that's to bring the iPhone.
So you're doing it another day. Okay. They don't know?
No.
They don't know? Really? How can they not know? But like seriously, how?